Hello and welcome to another episode of Public Affairs, Public Access on Houston Media Source. I'm your host, Stacey Davis. Tonight is our Election Watch special. I'm here with Valerie James, Danny Leon Sneed, Elaine Lewis, Damon Parrish, and Mark Bennett. Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, Stacey?
Good. I'm good. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. We'll start with Valerie. Just give us a little bit about who you are and who you want to see win tonight.
Okay, well, Valerie James, I am a veteran advocate in Texas. I love this place, and I want to see the Biden. I want to see the Biden ticket take it, all of it.
Let us know who you are.
Danny Sneed, also known as Mr. Go Live. And I'm supporting anything that's blue. And anything's blue. And I'm supporting my values. And I'm supporting the country moving more towards something that represents the character of what I believe the United States have always been viewed as. And so I prayed that we can wake up and have a different results than we did. So that being said, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and if I mispronounce her name, I will get it right in the next 4 years.
Right. You'll have 4 years to get it right. Elaine Lewis, tell us who you are and who you hope to win.
Well, if I could vote for this little guy, I would.
But so would I.
He refused to run. He refuses to do anything around the house except get loved on. My name is Elaine Lewis. I'm the former chair of the Harris County Democratic Party. I spent about 6 years in that position, 2011 through 2017. Before that, I was the Senate District 15 chair. Spent decades as a precinct chair. Former president of the Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus back in '97 when Niece Parker won her first city council race. And I am Biden Harris all the way, all the way. For starters, I tend to pick my candidates that don't throw racist gang signs. That's sort of the bar I think we should at least meet, and many other reasons that I am on the Biden-Harris team.
All right. Damon Parrish, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Good evening. I'm Damon Parrish. I'm a defense attorney in Houston, Texas. I am for whoever makes America a better place. In this particular election, I have voted for Biden because I just do not like Trump. But I will say I was not excited about voting for Biden or Kamala Harris, but I did vote for them. So I'm hoping that they can turn around, they can win. It looks like a close race, closer than I thought it would be or hoped it would be. I'm hoping they can pull out and help make this country better.
Well, that's so. Mark Bennett, tell us a little bit about yourself. Hi.
Hi, I'm Mark Bennett. I'm a criminal trial and appellate lawyer. I don't really care who wins. I would just like the election to be so definitive that we don't spend the next 6 weeks fighting about it. I'd like for the election to be over within a couple of days and not to have people stressed out about what the next 4 years are going to be like, because I think we're going to be okay, whatever happens.
Well, and it's looking like a very close race. So it looks like you're not going to get your wish, Mark. It looks like it's going to take a couple days before we figure out what's going to happen. I see people. Damon, do you want to comment on that?
I definitely just want the country to progress into a better way. I don't believe Trump has done so, but I do think, and I guess I don't know what you want to call it, patriotism, or it will be okay. We've endured a lot in this country. I can say that as a black man, and I think we will be okay. So that being said, I unfortunately do not believe that the race will be decided in a couple of days. It's looking like if things hold true, Biden may carry the Electoral College and Trump carry the popular vote. And I believe that Trump will then launch a nice set of lawsuits, and he's already stacked the Supreme Court with 3 of his picks. And I think that that's gonna draw this out for a good while.
Going into this, I expected that we wouldn't have an answer before the first of the year, and I'm not really very hopeful now about that.
One of the pundits stated something I thought was very important to point out. The country will not change how polarized it is, regardless of who wins. And, you know, they want to say it's a referendum against Trump. What I believe that I'm looking at, that if Trump, the people that supported him are still going to be on one side, and the people that for you're supporting Trump are going to be unforgiving, unrelentless, whether it's a family member or whatever. They're not, that they supported not Donald Trump, but his rhetoric, his beliefs, and always made excuses and explained away bad behavior. I never thought it was about Trump because too many people supported him. And 4 years from now, those won't be part of the conversation, but the people that supported him, where are they going to go? Them out of their beliefs. So we're still going to be dealing with them that believes what Trump believed. I digress.
Valerie, you have to unmute.
So there's a point to that. People who live by their emotions saying Trump's a racist, and there are people who will just say racist for anything. I don't think a person can be the ist of all of it. I think it's unfortunate that the bar is just so emotionally or the mature. He covers all the isms and bigots, and is it of it. And that's the sad part. And I just take note of, I don't think he does affect my life, because I make things happen on my own. Hopefully everyone here does. But what has changed is when's the last year you've seen the countries like England, or we've ostracized, he has ostracized everyone. Dangerous. And my point of people who support Trump, I don't think it's Trump. I agree with that. He took office, there was a certain group of people that were thrown off the bus. If you cursed at somebody or got someone, so there are laws against that now. He is at the table. So his name could be Becky. I don't want to say the term. People are just looking to protect the Republican. So evil and mean-spirited that support him, which is not all Republicans. I think they just support anybody who gives them a place at the table again to behave.
I wonder if we can talk a little bit about those undecided voters, because Republicans by the same numbers. You know, you've got the same number of people are going to vote for any given Republican. It's whether or not a Democratic candidate wins or not. So a lot of people have seen Trump flank the Democratic Party. Any comment on that? You know, as far as suggest we do something about the TPP, that kind of thing.
Well, I want to know that I just want to put some facts on the conversation. And overwhelmingly, they didn't want to see Donald Trump reelected. Other places, I think, like Israel, and the one that he got in all that trouble with,
Russia,
Ukraine. Russia was silent. Russia kind of kept a low. That people abroad had such an overwhelming who they wanted to see elected. Now, South Korea,
do, but that shouldn't play a factor at all. I honestly have never thinks about our country. I mean, you talk about Britain, and they elected Boris, British version of Trump. I mean, people always neighbors hate neighbors. You go to school and friends hate friends. That's just what it is. I've never cared what another country thinks about us. Because when when the last 4 years when Trump was president, I myself visited 3 different countries, right? And there was no issue. I went to Africa, Colombia, issue, right? Because when it's all said and done with those countries like this country, respect is the money. And so I was a tourist, I brought money, and then I don't particularly care if the British people want Trump. The British people aren't living, or if they don't want Trump. I don't care if people from Israel want. I care what we want, right? I care as Americans what we want, who we want to lead our country. I am happy that there is a high turnout in vote, and whoever wins leads the country to a better place. Whoever wins leads us to a better place.
Called the disrespect, I guess, that from European nations, you called it dangerous, but then you've got to look at what Trump has actually accomplished diplomatically in the Middle East, which probably makes the whole world safer, which is brokering peace between Israel and Arab nations, peace between Israel and Sudan. That stuff's huge.
That is huge.
Maybe he has a different style of diplomacy. Declaring trade war on Canada was certainly a novel move for U.S. president early on in his term, but on the other hand, there are results, and I think before COVID, most people would say that their lives were better off than they had been 4 years ago, which of course is as it should be. We should never have to look back and say our lives are worse than they were 4 years ago. But just on results, it's hard to say. Before COVID, it was hard to say on results that the country was not in a better place than it had been 4 years ago.
But I apologize, and like I said, I'm not necessarily a Democrat or Republican. I'm going to just put that out there. I do believe whoever handles the business at hand better, I'm for it. There are arguments on both sides. I'm for or against. So my point is, it reminds me of when people say, well, we get more money in our pocket. It's a trade-off of we're getting more money in our pocket, but relations in this country are out of control. I mean, you're seeing people make fun of people who have disabilities, grab them and even though that was said in the beginning, the respect level has not gotten any better. There is just people who are being told off in press conference. It's very childish. The tweets. I heard something about a veteran looking up from hell that died. And then when I hear the money part, it reminds me something of kind of like a pimp or a criminal, like I'm from Jersey, the wise guys. Hey, I put money in your pocket, so the way I behave, you just need to accept it. Hey, I'm getting you paid. Yeah, so I don't like that.
Because drug dealers in the community, they would throw big barbecues. They would give money to the church. So the drug dealer in our culture is hailed as a hero, because even though he's selling drugs, he takes that drug money. He takes from robs, the Robin Hood of the neighborhood. And I never liked the idea growing up that some of the most respected people were drug dealers, but because they had the nice cars and they lived in the nice homes, the people that should have been condemning them enabled them and explained away their behavior because of what? They had equity, they had money, they did things with the money that were positive. And to Valerie's point, when as a veteran, to tell John McCain, I don't think he's a war hero because he got caught, and then the country say, that's not so bad. But then we so patriotic about heroes and Americans. I'm a veteran, Valerie's a veteran. We both work for veterans and advocates for veterans that are marginalized and are fighting for better rights. And when the leader of the country can get away with saying dismissive things about generals, he had like 11 to 8 generals work for him. All of them was either fired. All the generals that worked up on the Trump administration, he fired every last one of them. And every last one of them said on record he was not fit for the position. So how do we opinion that worked beside him and then said, well, but he made the economy great? I digress.
You don't have to digress.
I mean, I think that, you know, that voter who voted for Obama and then turned around and voted for Trump. Like I say, people don't understand how Trump flanked the left from the left. You know, he promised us no more wars. He's promised us a lot of things that by all rights and purposes, the Democrats should be promising the American people. And it turns out the Republican people are. So is the Democratic Party going, if they lose this time, are they going to do an honest autopsy of what went wrong?
No.
No.
They picked Biden as their candidate. Why would they? They should have that autopsy. If you're going to say that, then they should have had that autopsy when Hillary lost. If you're going to have that, they didn't. They picked an established politician, one who to me his current tenure or tone is opposite of his tone 25 years ago when he helped push forth the omnibus bill with Bill Clinton. And so what you see now, in my opinion, is you see a career politician being a career politician, and he's just changing his tone to match what he thinks that people want to hear now. And you know, Trump, for better or worse, I didn't vote for him. I don't like him. I agree with what you said. But I will say this: I don't care. Me personally, I don't care if people say mean things, because I know people think mean things and people do mean things. And I don't know if I'd rather have a politician who would say nice things to my face and do mean things or set up mean policies behind my back, as opposed to one who just says, "Hey, this is how I feel." I don't think either one is better or worse. But you know, when I look at Biden and I look at what he's done, I look at Kamala Harris, and I look at her history, and I hear what they're saying now. I believe, personally speaking, that if the general tone of the public was in support of the three strikes bill and in support of tough criminal justice, Biden and Harris would come out toting their history. Hey, we made a mistake back then, despite the fact that its impact upon the black and brown communities. That's digression, as Danny would say. But you know, the fact that his military leaders don't support him, I think speaks volumes, and that should encourage the vote, and people should listen to that. But as Mark said, there's more than one thing at the table, or what he implied, that matter.
He's
Damien, can I respond to Damien's point when they point to Joe Biden supporting the 1994 crime bill? Because it's very important, because I was a part of that problem during that time. I was part of the situation that was causing the community to part of the council in my neighborhood that didn't come in and do something, then we were going to feed off each other. And here's my point: the crack epidemic was almost like the pandemic. It was so bad, nobody knew how to respond to the crack cocaine epidemic. Why? Because we were selling it, we knew how to hide it, and the police were outmanned. We in my neighborhood, when you went to church on Sunday, on your way to church, people were standing out selling drugs on the block on your way to church. So the black leaders, when they were building the crime bill, black leaders in black communities, no black leaders were speaking out and saying, this bill is bad for our community. Sure, I understand that how they label Bill, put all the blame on Joe Biden, and like nobody else was in the room and nobody else said this is a bad idea. It was a response to something I personally was.
Yeah, but Danny, now they have the benefit of hindsight. Now he could say that.
But I changed. I went to prison 3 times, and I would have went 4 times if I wouldn't have transitioned from believing that it's okay to rob, steal, and build a counselor in society. So if I can change the way I was thinking and reform what I believed back then, I believe crime was okay as long as you didn't get caught. In the 90s, it's 2020. I do not believe in what I believed in 1990. The 15 years I spent in prison, I thought a certain way. I hadn't been back to prison, and I don't think like I thought. How do we hold Joe Biden to a thought he had in the 90s in 2020 and not say he can transform and learn from what he thought then? I'll pass.
I'd like to hear from Lane. He hasn't said a word so far.
When I think of the things that can and should be accomplished by our nation, by our elected officials, I have to wonder whether or not those things can be accomplished without being untruthful, without making fun of other individuals, without creating racist divisions. And I think we can. My concern is the fact that we're currently in a situation where Biden is not winning by a blowout. We're in a situation where at least half of the American populace right now says, you know what? If a United States president wants to get up in front of a crowd of people and make fun of a physically challenged individual, that's okay. That if we have an American president that gets up in front of the American people and tells known white supremacist groups to just stand by, I might need you on election night. And we say that's okay. So when we look at what he can accomplish, and I disagree with Mark, I'm not sure how much of I really give credit to him. And I don't know what he's trading for it, right? He's a bartersman. That's what he is. So when he says, hey, I got this great thing for you, I don't know what he gave up of mine to get that thing for me. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But everything that surrounds the man, I find so suspect. And I don't think history is going to be very kind to him. I don't think history is going to be very kind to him. And Valerie may have been too. Giving things away to keep the populace entertained. The Catholic Church did it. I mean, this is not new, right? So they don't see that the majority is not available to someday being available. And so mental problem. Not only do I not like the man, he just like fingernails on a chalkboard every time he gets on the TV screen. But I don't believe fundamentally that's who I am as a person, or that's who our nation is.
And
of course, I read some of these books back here about our founding fathers, and there's a lot of that going on throughout our history.
How do you account for the 49% of your fellow Americans who have then there's something wrong with your model because it's happening.
I don't that's what I'm saying. I don't understand half these behaviors. I don't study and explain
the argument that it was time to elect for the Supreme Court that and it was too close to the election. So it's hypocrisy. It's like we call out Barack's behavior if he wore the wrong tie. When Michelle Obama didn't wear sleeves on her arm, they were up in arms about her decorum, like they're shaming the White House. But now, when someone when children, our kids, in America where morals and values were so put in such a high esteem, and we were supposed to believe that we were supposed to do the right thing, say the right thing at all times. Now the bar is short.
You just got done telling us what your history was at that time when we were coming up. You can't say
that
we had this high regard for morals and values and at the same time say, shit, I did all this wrong stuff and now I've turned my life around, and we should trust that Joe Biden has turned his life around too.
What do we do if we don't believe people can change?
No, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I believe that people can change. I don't believe that Kamala Harris has changed. That she is a person who puts people in. That's who she will always be. Joe Biden.
Yeah, I would say Joe Biden has had plenty of time to take that policy that he wrote and say it was problematic. I mean, in this campaign right now, you're saying he can change, but you kind of have to declare that, And also, I'd like to say that I don't understand how you can take a country that is all about stepping over people to get ahead. I mean, this is a capitalist country. It's all about your financial bottom line, no matter who gets hurt. So I don't know how we can look at a country where that's the financial model and be shocked that we're looking at a system that that there's hypocrisy in a system like this.
I don't see why Trump.
So I would say this, Danny. One of the things you mentioned, you talked about trading, or no, I'm sorry, Elaine mentioned trading. I think Danny, you alluded to it about trading. What a president said was what he does. I firmly believe that the success of the omnibus bill was traded on the backs of Black and brown men. I believe that. I believe the omnibus bill had a lot of benefits to the Democrat Party, but to sell it, you had to create something they can rally behind, and everybody rallies behind a common enemy. They rally. Every soldier needs a war, and they rally behind an enemy, and they made that enemy Black and brown men. And so I believe that we were traded, and I've said this before today. I believe we were traded for the gains of that omnibus bill, and I resent it. During that time period, I was 10 years old. I can tell you in my life, I've never sold a single drug in my life. I've been to jail many times, but that was to visit my clients. I've never felt handcuffs, never once been arrested before. I grew up in the life, Danny, that you kind of described. I went to church. I graduated from Houston Baptist University. I married my high school sweetheart. I'm still married to this day, 15 years, and I'm 38 years old. I got married at 23. I lived that life that America is supposed to be, but I am the minority in that pool, right? And we always look at America with these freaking rosy, like, oh my gosh, this whatever, and we ignore like how unions came to be, how we had child labor laws. We ignore how besides kids working in plants, people died in factories, and how many people died building the infrastructure we use today. We ignore how corporations have always abused people in this country, right? And so we get to a point today where America's great and we have this situation. We ignore the fact that something I just learned recently, segue kind of, that after the many nuclear bombs in the Midwest. The fallout of that spread across the country, right? Nuclear windfall. We don't know if maybe the high cancer rate we have in this country comes from my grandparents breathing in nuclear air or radioactive air. And that was Supreme Court. I'm just saying and we talked about president trading. The Clinton administration, with the help of Democrats, traded on Black and browns to sell that bill. I've said before, I hope that Biden wins because I'm hoping he can chart a better course, right? He seems to be speaking things that seem to be more of unison, and I'm for that. And more importantly, different economists have theorized our economy will rebound faster with Biden versus Trump. And so that means that, hey, bottom line works better as well. But I don't think it's fair to say, hey, man, Trump may be trading A for B, and we don't know what he's trading when Biden definitely did the exact same thing. And every leader has done the exact same thing in our community. So we can't expect any president or leader moving forward to not trade something we don't see that will potentially harm us for something we do want now. And I'll speak about that crime bus bill later, Danny, because I do believe that we were duped. I don't believe every major metropolitan suffered from this like mega gang roaming around selling drugs on a street corner. That seemed to have been like New York, Chicago, the big ones. In Austin, Texas, where I grew up, we didn't. I walked to school. I walked to church. There was no drug dealers selling me drugs. I don't believe that existed, and I believe if you want to stop drugs, and this is now the defense attorney in me, if you want to stop drugs, you don't stop the person on the street corner selling, making $1,000 a week. You stop the person importing drugs, making $5 million a week. But they didn't stop that person because that person lived in their community as well. If you want to stop drugs, you don't have a crack cocaine policy that says if you sell 300 years, you sell 3 ounces of cocaine, you get, well, Mark knows better, you get like 5 years. That's federal law, but Mark knows. Because the cocaine being sold, which is worse, went to affluent white people, but the crack, which was not as bad as cocaine, went to poor brown people, and so people getting 25 years for a lesser ounce crack cocaine. We got traded.
And that's a problem that it took 15, 20 years to even start to fix, was the disparity, that particular disparity.
Who was it that was it? I'm sorry. Who was it that said, was it Malcolm X that was talking about the drug problem in the black ghettos? And he said, I don't know a black man that has a boat or a plane. Right. This stuff's not just dropping, it's coming from somewhere, and nobody I know has a boat or a plane. I think it was Malcolm. I don't remember. But Stacey took what I had said earlier and made a good point in that, if I can put words in her mouth. She was basically saying, can we be surprised as a president if he our nation is founded on? I think the bottom line. Blah, blah, no, I completely understand. But is that what is that? We have to look at the behaving poorly and say, okay, if I was going to raise my kid, I used to be a school teacher, and I have nieces and nephews. I would never laugh at making abilities and things, whether or not. I can say, but is that where we want? Clearly, half of this.
So,
update. Because I don't think it's as close as Mark thinks it is anymore.
I'm not trying to look at that. COVID, the mail-in ballots.
If you get tonight, do you and you win at 320 to
we're at 213 versus 118.
So that's not close.
So far from 270 that you can't tell anything, because we don't have Pennsylvania, we don't have Florida, we don't have Texas, we don't
have Ohio.
213 is a lot from 270 versus 114.
We're missing Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida.
But
Ohio, we're missing
Texas.
Ohio and Texas.
I mean, the swing states are not on the map yet.
Right.
I mean, you can. A lot of that is predictable. The West Coast, totally predictable. I mean, there was no question about Washington, Oregon, California, New York, Vermont.
Right.
So I think 213 is not really. I mean, yeah, it's closer to 270 than 118 is, but not in a way that we can say, oh, he's almost got it now, because the things that are missing are so big. But
yeah, as soon as he gets Texas and Florida,
right, and then we're in a horse race. Elaine, do you watch reality TV shows?
Very little.
So the people voting for Trump, I think, watch reality TV shows. I think Trump is a reality TV show producer.
I would agree.
And I don't like him. I think he's crass. I think he's lucky. But that's about the only kind thing that I would have to say about him. But that's where he came from, was reality TV show. And reality TV show producers aren't producing truth. They're not producing facts. They're producing what they know people will want to watch, right? They're telling a story that people will tune into.
It's a fair point.
So, I think
why did he work so hard? I could. It's so easy for us to buy into Trump, but he works so hard to be unlikable.
Danny, if I must say something, and this is going to be really scary. I don't think he's working hard at that. I think that is his persona for real. That was the point I was trying to make when I was speaking so much earlier.
The economy, the things were going great. It's like, how do you blame the guy when things are doing well before the COVID? It's like, if it wasn't for his rhetoric, and you look at the policies and the other things are going good, behavior versus, to Mark's point, the things he pointed out that was good, how do they overshadow good? You have to work really hard to overshadow.
But it's not hard work at all. He gets up, and when he speaks, it's going to come out that way.
It's like,
when I was 12 years old and Clinton was going through his Monica Lewinsky thing, we want a politician. We don't care about his personal behavior. We're not electing a moral leader. We're electing a politician. I remember hearing that from a lot of people on the news about Clinton when he was in a very moral situation with Monica Lewinsky. That everybody was like, "That's not our business. That's between him and Hillary. We're not electing a moral leader. It's not Pope. He's president." I heard that he's not Pope. He's president. Like I said, I don't like Trump, but I don't think it's fair to say, well, Trump is not moral when Democrats have had moral issues with their leaders. They have said we're there for policies, not for morality.
But may I say, Damon, in response, you have a great point. And I did, when people say, well, who's the bigger pervert with females, Clinton or Trump? I say it's a toss-up. I do not, because people think I'm a Democrat, so they expect me to say, well, Trump is a toss-up. It is a toss-up. But the difference is President Clinton, his morals are atrocious when it comes to females. When it comes to President Trump, his morals are atrocious to that and everything else.
Everybody who's not in his family, right?
Yeah, and that's it's a huge difference.
Even some who are.
So
I mean, I don't want to limit Clinton's immorality to females. Like I said, I do blame him for the issue with Black and brown people. Go ahead, Mark.
I mean, think about our relationship with power and with people in power since 1776, right? We don't trust people who are in power. That's what our Constitution is designed to do, is to say we can't trust these people. So why? I'm not surprised. I don't think it should have surprised us to see somebody so crass and unlikable being elected to president, when the whole idea is that we don't trust whoever we elect president.
That Frankenstein, I will first just own it, Donald Trump, the Tea Party. People don't even mention the Tea Party, but the Tea Party was trying to create the Frankenstein, but nobody could really go out there and represent them. And they had the movement and they were going. But John McCain squashed it. And I remember the moment when he let the air out of the Tea Party. When that lady stood up and say, but Barack Obama, he's a Muslim, he's this. She said, no. He said, no, ma'am. No, he's not. He's an American. That moment right there galvanized and just squashed their dreams on a national platform that John McCain was going to represent what they wanted someone to do, is to attack the character of his opponent. And McCain refused to do it. Romney refused to do it. And the Tea Party was infuriated that they couldn't get their candidate to stoop and throw stones and just go all in. But along comes Trump. Like, we finally got what we needed. Someone to say what I'm thinking. I digress.
I mean, I think you have to also admit that the Tea Party was also a response to the 2008 stimulus for big banks that happened after the crash. I mean, the Tea Party was a response to Democratic failure, and basically our country's failure on the whole. I mean, you can't just blame all of that on just like you can't just like the Tea Party was basically Occupy for the right. And even though it wasn't the best attempt, it should be noticed that the direction that this country is going in is one with a K-shaped recovery. It's doing really great for some people and really poorly for other people, and that's the failure of the Democratic Party that the Democrats still haven't looked at after losing to Trump in 2016.
I'll give y'all some background. When I was party chair, Hillary Clinton came to Houston. She was still secretary. She was not running for president yet, but she came to TSU and gave a speech on gun safety. There was about Sheila Jackson Lee was taking the lead on it. I helped her put it together. We had about 2,500, 2,600 people there. I could name just about every elected official, both Democrat, and there were some Republicans that were there. Precinct chairs. I mean, I recognized everybody in the room. They were the hardcore Democratic base voter. They're going to vote no matter what in the Democratic primary and in the general. Shortly thereafter, I got a call from the Bernie Sanders campaign, who had already announced he was running for president. And they said, we're going to be in town in about a week and a half. Will you help? Blah, blah, blah. They gave me about 200 seats right next to the stage that I could give to anybody I wanted. Had a hard time giving those away to the hardcore Democratic base. When I walked into the auditorium, it was over at the University of Houston, there was about 5,000 people there. Mm-hmm. It was packed. And I couldn't give away 200 seats to my hardcore Democratic base. Right. So just right there, I knew Bernie Sanders was not going to win the primary, because the hardcore Democratic base was firmly behind Hillary. But Bernie was the one that could have won the general, in my opinion. But he couldn't win the primary. Because the primary voters, these college kids, they were not primary voters. They were general voters. I don't know if you understand my analogy, but it was
I do, but the Democrats haven't done anything to change that.
No, they ran him up. We got Elizabeth Warren and Bernie, but no, they didn't. At the end of the day, everybody cut a deal with Biden, who was not my first choice. He wasn't even my second choice.
He was anybody's first choice.
I can name a couple of people it was. And I like Biden. I'm gonna tell you the story about Biden. When Clinton was the first president that I knew that used the word gay in his acceptance speech. And I mean, it brought tears to my eyes. I was 20 years old, 21 years old. It was just a phenomenal moment for me. Fast forward a few years, Don't Ask, Don't Tell comes down the pike. And Biden was the only guy that I recall standing up at a press conference saying, this is BS. This does not go far enough. This is a Band-Aid on the problem. I'd never even heard of Biden until then. He's been on my radar ever since, because I thought that was so bold for him to stand up against the Democratic Party and say, this is not acceptable. But even with that said, I like Biden, but he was not my first choice.
Well, Don't Ask, Don't Tell had to be repealed for the amount of damage it did in the military. You could go to war, and if somebody found out you were gay, you were thrown out with a dishonorable discharge. So that just went real wrong, horribly wrong. But I did not know Joe Biden was the person who argued it.
And this is an example. It's a good example of an issue that just doesn't hit the kitchen table issues that the American people really care about. I mean, I know that it's important. The identity politics is important, And we all want everybody to be treated equally, but that's just not why people vote. They vote on the economy 9 times out of 10, and the Democrats haven't done a whole lot for the American people, for the American people's pockets. And I think that's what people vote on.
And what's so odd to me is that some people say this is the thing that is highest on my list of concerns, but then they vote opposite of that. And I'll give you an example. Poll came out. The number one thing on the average Texas voter, things that they were the most concerned about, number one was COVID. Number two was the economy. And then everything else was way at the bottom. So if the number one thing on my mind is COVID, how do I then go and turn around and vote for the guy who said in private, this is a really big deal, a lot of people are going to die, but don't tell anybody, and then walk out in a press conference and say, it's the flu, it'll be over by Easter. No big deal, don't worry about it. I don't know how people, I just don't. Things in my life make sense.
You know too much, Lane. That's the problem. You know too much.
So Lane, I'll say as an attorney, your issue is you're not defining what COVID is. You say the issues, the people say COVID's the issue, and how is COVID issue? Some people view COVID as not like the issue is we're putting too much to it. We're putting way too much into it. We're the mask, the when you don't go to work and you stay at home orders, whatever it's called, all that, like we're putting way too much into it. And so get back to work. COVID is an issue. The issue is it's not an issue. Get back to work. I've got friends.
You know what? I think people, I believe it's an issue. I don't think that's the fact that they don't, but hey, Damon, respect, right? I think the problem is the second part you said. If COVID is making people not able to go to work, the kids can't go to school, they can't go to work. I think it's becoming COVID might kill me or I'm going to be homeless. And they're choosing a job and keeping the house afloat.
I think I have more forest view, more fundamental view of it, which is they don't know, they don't think that deeply. People make their voting decisions like jurors make their conviction decisions, which is based on pure emotion. And sometimes they'll back it up with facts. They'll generally filter the facts through the emotion rather than filter the emotion through the facts. And so Lane, the mystery about why these people are voting the way they do, you know more than they, and they're not making the decisions based on the same things you are. For the most part, they're making a decision based on emotion, and Trump appeals to that somehow for a lot of people.
Well, and even if you take the COVID-19 and you take Biden's policies versus Trump policies, there's no distinction whatsoever. Biden has never mentioned contact tracing or selective quarantine as a way of quelching this. Nobody really mentions that at all. That's how the countries that are successful with COVID-19 are successful. Nobody ever mentions that in America. Nobody.
There's probably a good reason for that, Stacey.
And then
because it's already gotten away from us.
Well, people would never go for it. It's too much for the Americans.
That's the reason.
You know, what if Donald Trump told his followers, yeah, we're going to have to check in every restaurant we go to. You're going to have to check in on a thing on your phone, the way they do it in South Korea. If Donald Trump told his followers, then they would do it.
If he had done that 6 months ago.
Sure.
Now probably, you're right.
But like I say, it's not even something that the Democrats are bringing up. So that wouldn't do much different with COVID.
If President Obama in his tenure would have stood on 5th Avenue and shot someone, and they had it videotaped, and they played it on all the networks, I still would say, man, you know what? You wrong, Obama, for doing that, but I still would have voted for him. So I get it. So I don't act like if my guy was running that I would be so morally, we should look at his moral behavior. If he would have cheated on Michelle, I'd have been like, man, you know what? What they got to do with him being president? I would have dismissed and downplayed anything Barack would have did. Point blank, period. So I get it. I don't act like I'm holier than now because it's Trump on the ticket and like, look what he did. Look what he said. That's their guy. Hey, man, fight for your guy. I remember when the Barack was running the second time, I was on pins and needles. Oh man, it was so stressful thinking that he couldn't make the second term. And I didn't care about the politics, what he had accomplished, what he did, good or bad. He was my guy.
So that goes to Mark saying it's more emotion than.
Yeah, that's their guy. That's my guy. You know, my guy can't do no wrong.
So then the persuasion question is, why is he their guy, and why can't he be? Why can't our guy be their guy? And I think part of that is Biden is establishment, and people see Trump as not establishment. And I think Trump has pretty well proved that he's not establishment. He hasn't drained the swamp. He should be a big disappointment to people who expected him to do that. But his corruption is not. His corruption is New York style. Everybody knows it's going on corruption. Whereas the establishment politicians' corruption is, well, we're going to do this under the table and maybe nobody will find out corruption. The representatives, for example, who were insider trading on knowledge of COVID at the same time they were coming out and denying that it was a problem. I mean, Trump, he appears to me to be a corrupt guy. He's a guy who will hire you to do a job and then not pay you to do the job. He won't fulfill the contract with you. And I don't think we should expect any better from him as president, but he is different in his blatantness than the people that we've elected in the last 100 years.
We have a little update. It's currently 223 to 145.
What?
223 Biden, 145 Trump.
With Texas and Florida still out, right?
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah, I think they're both leaning pink.
That's what, 60 votes, 70 votes?
Yeah, I believe so.
Florida.
Also, Pennsylvania, not yet counted.
So Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida's not even on the map yet.
Yeah.
As well as Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan.
They're projecting it's going to come down to between Arizona, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So Texas and Florida is not like, they're already probably giving Trump Texas and Florida without it added to the count.
I don't follow.
What I'm saying is we can go ahead and add Texas and Florida to that 145.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then
it involves math.
212. That's 212.
That's how much Trump will get.
If we count Texas and Florida, and then Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Maine are still.
Yeah, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Arizona, and Arizona was leaning toward Biden.
Yeah.
Which is unusual.
Nevada and Alaska.
Amanda, are you on right now?
Yes, briefly. I'm here to represent Papa. So, because I know Paul Colby and Russ Klein and Jay Corey are not really feeling it tonight, and I'm not really either, but I wanted to say hey to everybody, and thank y'all and Mark Pirtle and everybody for keeping this station going. I'm honestly, this might be the only thing I come on and say tonight, but I just did want to say hello to everybody, and this is a weird ass election. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I just violated an FCC rule.
You can say
as long as I violated one. Let me take a sip of my gin and tonic.
Our president said you can say
a glass of water.
Right? Yeah, it's water. It looks like water, doesn't it? But anyway, thank you all for everything you are doing. I have been volunteering like a mad woman for the past couple of months, and as everybody knows, I ran for city council, so I know how important it is to have volunteers and do those get out the vote efforts. I think what we're seeing in Texas tonight is the craziest thing I've seen since we've been in Texas, where it's still too close to call, on a lot of the major news networks, and it's been flipping back and forth. I feel like that's saying a lot about the demographics of Texas. I think that's fantastic.
Harris County had a lot to do with that.
Yes. Yes.
They say it's all the Californians moving into Texas.
I don't know about that. I've known some people who flipped from Republican to Democrat in the past 4 years, and I'm, hey, Texas is always gonna do its own thing, and that's why I love it. And Texans are mouthy, and we're just, we're loud. We want what we want, and we try to get what we want as much as we can. So.
And
thank you, Amanda.
What's that?
Had an affinity for billionaires. I mean, when you look at Ross Perot when he tried to run.
Oh yeah.
So they don't really have a history of, the Bushes had money, but they didn't have Trump type money, and they didn't flaunt it like they were.
Trump didn't have Trump type money.
We're still not sure Trump has Trump type money. Yeah, I was gonna say he's been bankrupt like how many times? People believe that he does. I don't think Trump has Trump money.
Yeah, he didn't have money.
I paid more in taxes last year than Trump did, and I barely make anything. So yeah, Trump doesn't even have Trump money.
He prepaid, Amanda. He prepaid. like the post office.
Yeah, here's my water. Cheers to him.
Got those forever tax stamps.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, I don't want to take over the conversation because I've mostly just been listening to y'all for a few minutes, and no, it is a pleasure to be on here with y'all, and here's to watching the rest of whatever's coming in tonight.
All right. Thank you, Amanda.
Amanda, it's called the final season of the United States of America.
Right?
Oh Lord, help us, everyone.
Exactly.
Actually, Damon was saying that you don't really think it's going to affect you either way if Trump becomes president. Talk a little bit about that, Damon, if you will.
2016, Trump was elected president. He had a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Right? We're still here. We may not know the full effect of what Trump has done for years to come. The Supreme Court justices, the federal court justices that he's appointed, but I guess my personal motto is not a doom and gloom kind of guy. I'm also not overly optimistic. I'm just more wake up every day and do what I got to do. I look at this country, and I don't look at this country with the same way a lot of people do. I don't look at it with the rosy red lens. And maybe because I'm strong in my Black history. I look at this country and I see like there's always been a time of turmoil. There's always been a time of strife and struggle. Somebody was always being persecuted, and when it wasn't Black people, many people don't know that Hispanics, Mexican men were the target of all the drug laws at first. The marijuana tax was against Hispanic men, Mexican men. Yeah. There's always been a picked person who was the target before, or when you don't know this one, the origins of the Ku Klux Klan is not even a racial war against Black people. They originated in the East Coast as the Know Nothings against Irish. There were British people targeting Irish people, which I mean, I'm not big on my European history.
Scottish.
I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean, I can't tell the difference between a Brit, a Scot, and an Irish person. I know they exist, but I just can't tell the difference.
So the Brits are the ancestors of the ones who are now voting for Biden, and the Scots and the Irish are the ancestors of the guys who are now voting for Trump. That's how you tell the difference.
That's true.
I still can't tell the difference. I look at, no offense, Stacy, Lane, Mark, and Amanda, and either one of y'all could be British, Irish, or Scottish, and I would not know the difference. But the point I'm making is this country has always had years and years and years and years and years of intense strife and struggle, and it's persevered. I think it still will. And I don't think the America I sit in today is suffering from the same strife and struggle that existed 100 years ago. I'm not saying it's not going through issues. For sure it is, and it always will be. But I don't think it's the same. And at least I don't hope it's the same. And I think one thing about the American people, our history has shown, is that we persevere. We came over, or the American settlements came over with what was it? the three boats, Nina, the Minta, the Pinta Marie, whatever.
Santa Maria.
Santa Maria, of overcoming obstacles and struggle for good or bad in good or bad ways. And we hope to now overcome obstacles in a positive way, not to the detriment of another people. But I think we will persevere. And so for the last 4 years, the country has persevered. We started off with Trump in an all Republican Congress, and we're still here. We will see what happens next. I think we will still be here. I don't think we're going to fall apart tomorrow.
Yeah.
The British Empire.
Thank you for that, Damon. That was really beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you.
Mark's one of my mentors, so he taught me how to talk.
On that note, I am gonna duck out, check in with my my Papa buddies and see how they're doing. But
right.
had to pop my head in and say hello to everybody, and
thank you, Amanda.
Keep doing the good work. I love y'all. Keep fighting.
Thank you. Take care.
I wanted to add that when Trump won in 2016, the next day I did an hour segment on Houston Media Source covering it, and I didn't have I was supposed to be the and can do this. Then they're like, the pressure. So it was the next day, and Trump had won, and hey, I had to just I was like, okay, it happened. And I used this analogy of how bad I felt. I said, first of all, it reminded me, because I'm a huge Cowboy fan, of a game where Tony Romo, only thing he had to do was hold the ball, and we need to kick a field goal, and we were going to the Super Bowl. And just like Charlie Brown and Lucy, they hiked the ball, and Tony Romo fumbled the ball, and the kick went awry. And you know how avid Cowboy fans are. We didn't go to the Super Bowl, and we were devastated. Like the whole Cowboy Nation was just devastated, and we just couldn't believe this has happened. And that's how I felt that next day when I looked at the paper in Trump. It was the most believable moment in my lifetime. But I wasn't fearful that he had been elected, because in the realness of it, it wasn't going to change the dynamics of the universe I lived in Houston, Texas, where I worked, where I shopped, where I worshiped, how I treated my family. I knew that wasn't going to change. What I didn't expect was that America was look like the Civil War did. And back then, which you could never imagine the Civil War except in movies, right? But now in 2020, you like, oh, I get it. This is what the Civil War looked like. Americans against Americans. Like, the only thing is not happening is they're not shooting into each other, but minus the bullets, it could be the Civil War all over again. With the polarization of the country and just how people are so dug in against, I'm pro this, I'm anti this. I won't say it. I pass.
Are y'all looking at are we losing the House? I mean, when I say
I haven't. Why don't you look into that, Lane, and give us
because I mean, we had solid control of it an hour ago, and now it looks like Democrats are at 136 and Republicans are at 146.
I hope that's backwards.
Is that right?
According to CNN, it is. And then their Senate projection is 50-50, which we were losing the Senate an hour ago. So I don't know. It's going to be
I can't veg on it because someone help me. Was it the election between President Barack Obama and was it Romney? Who was he running against? And it was supposed to be this big tie, but when it fell, the numbers were near what the polls thought it was going to turn out to be. What did he win at? What did President Obama? Was it?
He wanted a pretty significant margin, I believe, because so many people came out to the polls.
Yeah. But the polls had it where it was neck and neck, and it was completely wrong. So I can only watch the numbers so much before.
And this is the other thing, and Mark educated me on this, if you know.
Mark's educating a lot of people. I like it.
You saw, not only in Texas, but nationwide, enormous spikes in voter participation. New voters voting for the first time of all age groups, and people who don't normally vote coming out to vote nationwide. So, who are these people that are so inspired by this year that they were not inspired in previous years?
So what's the opposite of inspired, right? Because I don't think these are people who are coming out to vote for something.
Uninspired?
Disenchanted?
No.
Disenchanted?
No, coming out to so people are coming out to vote against something.
Yeah.
So Democrats not coming out to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but coming to vote against Trump. Republicans or Trump voters coming not to vote for Trump, but to vote against the chaos in the streets, which is how the Republicans have branded this year. So I think that's the answers. These aren't people, again, not based on rationality or the knowledge, the sort that you have, but just pure emotion. They'll watch TV and they'll see rioting.
When I was party chair, I used to make the point that in my belief that when the election becomes about voting against something, Republicans win. When the election is branded as we're voting for something, Democrats win. You know, inspiration versus desperation.
Hope versus fear.
Hope, exactly.
Right. You may be right. I don't know, but I think that's where the votes are coming from. It's not the new voters are coming from. Is not necessarily that they're inspired to act for a candidate, but rather that they're more inspired to act against what the candidate stands or purports himself to stand against.
By the way, Florida was just called for Trump.
That figures.
As was Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. How'd that happen?
So we got 223 to 174 now.
Yeah, 223.
Oregon Biden.
So I want to tell a story about my 30-year class reunion. So the 30-year class reunion, I was on the committee. And I'm from Texarkana, Texas, if you know anything about Northeast Texas. And I assumed that I grew up in a pretty balanced environment. But my classmates constantly remind me that racism existed back then. And I'm trying to like dismiss it. It probably did. But there was no lynchings. So, you know, how do you define racism? You know, like, you know, you kind of like, it's woven into it's normalized. I think I end up normalizing how I looked at racism, because if it wasn't causing me direct pain, the overt racism, like you go in the shop and then they follow you around the store, that wasn't so offensive to me as it should have been. But back to the 30-year class reunion, when we got ready to have the planning committee, we started having problems when we were talking about food and what we're going to do. So the food, the first thing that caused division was I wasn't lobbying for fried chicken, but I was lobbying against some of the things on the menu that I felt that it wasn't going to be inclusive. And when I use the word inclusive and it causes uproar. They were like, what are you talking about? I was like, let's think outside the box. When we do the menu, realize that it has to serve to where it doesn't. Do you know what I'm trying to say about food? How you can serve food that
you got to feed everyone.
I'm not calling food racist.
No,
People,
you gotta have something everybody wants to eat.
Right, but they couldn't get it. So I said, let's go to the next thing. Like, what are we gonna do for fun? They wanted to do golfing for fun. I'm like, hold up on the golfing. Like, I'm not against golfing. I love Tiger Woods, but you really think golfing is the best idea? Oh, we're going to do golfing and motorcycle rides. Like motorcycle rides and golfing. Those are going to be some of the events at our 30-year class reunion for fun. So here I am. I'm not going in hard. I'm like, wait a minute. Can we have some events that are a little bit more inclusive? Golf is kind of, I don't know how many of us golf.
Boring.
Well, think about it. How many of us golf, really? Or, it's not being biased or racist, but again, I try to make the point, like, it's not about being racist. And, we had to end up having to cut the chase. It was so divisive in just trying to do the planning that we had to have 2 reunions.
Oh.
We had to have 2 reunions.
What year was this?
My 30-year reunion. I'm 56. Do the math.
So, when did you graduate high school?
1982.
So it was 2012.
2012. Okay. So what was going on in 2012?
It was Obama's election, second bid.
Okay, so I'm not saying that had a lot to do with it, but it was so divisive that we couldn't have a 30-year reunion. We had 2 reunions on the same night. On the same night.
Well, that says it.
In 2012, long before Trump ever was in existence, there was division trying to plan a 30-year class reunion. So when I look at the Trump era, that's what I'm saying. I don't have a problem with Trump. Think about how many million people voted for him? How many people voted for Trump in the election? 40?
Still counting. You're still
60
counting.
million tonight.
Come out in 2016. 40 million plus people voted for Donald Trump. I'm gonna say 40 million. I have to live around these 40 million people and not know that they may have voted for him and they believe and think and align with some of his beliefs that are all the isms,
The isms.
Right, the isms.
But I'm not sure. Again, my point was not that he believes in the isms. My point was the emotional state, the childlike state, whatever it is that drives that behavior, the entertainer. I think that bar is just set so low. It's not an ism. I don't think he's a racist at all. I don't think he's a sexist. I don't even think he's a bigot as far as people who even though he did that thing with reporters, I think that's just that level of I don't know what the word ignorance comes to mind.
Crass.
Okay. Yeah.
I was in a car one time with Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, and we were driving around, and this was during the Hillary campaign. And I asked her off the cuff, I said, have you met Donald Trump? And she said, oh, yeah. I knew Donald back in the 80s. Of course, she was coming off the Wonder Woman series, so she had some notoriety at that time. And she said, he is exactly who you think he is. What you see is exactly who he is in person, which I thought was very telling. Going back to what Danny was saying, in 2005, I was taking a education and the law class at the University of St. Thomas. There was maybe 1 or 2 Latinos. I think I was maybe the only white dude in there. The majority of the class was African American. And somehow or another, the conversation came around to race. This was about 2004, I think, something around in there, 2005. And the issue came around to race, and the majority of, actually, no, it was after that, because it was after Barack had been elected. So it must have been around 2009, I guess. Anywho, and the conversation was that racism was minimized in America at this point. And there seemed to be general consensus in the room that racism had been minimized. Now, as the only white guy in the room, I didn't feel like I probably should speak up on the topic. But I was shaking my head, so the teacher called on me, who was also African American. And I said, well, I would disagree. I think racism is alive and flourishing in this country. And they said, well, why do you think that? And I said, well, look at me. I'm white, blue eyes, and I'm in the room when you're not. So I hear what's being said in the room when y'all aren't around. And I'm from Pasadena, Texas, to boot. And so I didn't recognize at that time that what I was describing was this underbelly undercurrent that Trump has managed to tap into and give a voice to. I didn't recognize that that's what I was seeing at the time. I just knew that it was there.
You know, I gotta put this thought out. I guess so. I think the point Damon made is correct. I think the blacks in that class were correct. Here's why I say that. The same way you say when you are not in the room, you hear conversation about blacks. Well, when you're not in the room, I hear the conversation about whites, and it's no prettier. So if his window is broken, all the races are holding bricks at this point in this day. So it can't be this one-sided, well, you here because I'm where you're not standing. And we need to understand there are two sides that are, I mean, not saying there's some, equality, complete equality, but Damon's point, my point is true. It has minimized because we just elected a black president twice. The Electoral Party put him in twice. You know what I mean? And if people ask me the truth of who the true person who lacked, and the reason I don't believe this is so much racism, that the country has some ingrained hate, is now let's look at races, right? Racism. And now let's look at women. How often is woman sexually assaulted?
Well,
per minute.
Half of all women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
Yeah, the numbers don't even nearly match up. And guess what? That's only, you see how you're shaking your head? It's horrible. And that's only what's reported.
Right.
If you really did a statistic and every time it happened, it was known, it's not once every 60 seconds, it's probably once every 10 seconds. So it's not just something against a color. It's like everyone's saying in here that it's the country just has this. It's like Trump. There's no ism. Everyone has this behavior towards people.
Well, and there's also a correlation between the economy and racism or otherism. That sort of thing increases when the economy gets more divisive.
You're right. Whenever the economy goes down, for instance, women are and domestic violence rises. There's been a high rise of domestic violence against women and children since COVID happened.
Right, and you can see the same thing happening in the Ukraine, as they're the one of the least successful European countries. Their racism sort of, which they have a long history of that, rears its ugly head. As the as their economy goes south.
But if you to think about that, while you're saying racism goes bad, do we have statistics on how often women are abused in that country? There is a much higher amount of abuse, but it's almost invisibly seen. Like, oh yeah, but that's expected. And
I think that
isms all act up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I used to work at a hospital called Integral Hospital. And we had a group there. This is back when I was doing social work over the medical center. And we had a monthly group there with our patients about isms. And every time we met, we would pick an ism and we would have a discussion about that ism, weightism, sexism, et cetera, et cetera. And what was so interesting was going to Valerie's point somewhat. It didn't matter what we were talking about, what ism was the topic of the night and how it addressed people. by the end of the discussion, every single time it ended up coming down to gender differences, the expectation of the masculine versus the feminine, and the dominance of one over another, and how they affected that is.
That's true.
Every class. That was in 91, I think. 91.
I get a little worried that about the whole identity politics issue, because it's just so easy to get people fighting amongst themselves. It's easier to do that than it is to. I mean, you know what we need is justice for all. We need cops to be held accountable, and for example, and when we focus on this sort of identity politics, Black Lives Matter, we divide the question into, it's just too easy to polarize that. It's too easy to say, well, what about the white people that get killed by cops? I mean, really, we need cops to stop killing people. It needs to be, the focus needs to be on policy less than identity, because if the policy is equal towards all, then we have equality towards all.
While I was party chair, one of the very first things I did when I came into office and I was preparing for 2012, I did something that was met with such resistance. And that was, I hired no identity politics type of employees. Traditionally, the way the party had done it was you had a Black outreach coordinator, you had a brown outreach coordinator, you had an LGBT outreach coordinator. And when I came in, I said, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to have an education coordinator, someone to talk about education, someone to talk about healthcare, right? And we're going to put different teams on this because different communities need to talk about those subjects in different ways, right? And I tried to make it about the issues that were important rather than, but it was met with such resistance, and I'll be honest, it wasn't particularly successful, because at the end of the day, people wanted to be with like image as opposed to like thought.
Just for the sake of knowing I'm not that person ever, but go ahead. Ever.
Yeah. Well, this is part of the problem with the Democratic Party. That it's full of centrist Democrats who really can't relate to what the majority of the American people are going through, and why 56% of the population does not vote. And you've basically got the two well-to-do classes of people deciding who rules all of us.
Yeah, it's disappointing. If I can badmouth my party for a minute, it's disappointing that when you get a candidate like a Warren or like a Sanders that comes in and starts talking to those issues, those economic and health issues that affect those of us at the bottom, so to speak, or in the middle, that our party, the DNC, would then go and do all these shady stuff to make sure that Hillary gets the nomination. And then we wonder why we're losing elections. Right?
Guys, we have 5 minutes left to go, so I'm going to go around the circle that I have 3 minutes left to go. So you guys have like 30 seconds. We're going to wrap it up. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Go.
So I'm not as interested in the presidential election tonight as in the Court of Appeals elections, and I'm happy to see that Russell Lloyd is getting trounced in the first Court of Appeals. That's going to make my night. If it holds, I'm going to wake up happy.
Valerie.
Okay, I'm just looking at that the Democrats have taken the House apparently, and it's looking like they're about to take the Senate. So again, I'm with Damon and everyone. We've survived this long. My only point of this is great. The economy is good because people are losing money right now. I just my heart is not. We cannot have someone who is dividing everyone. Everyone is at each other's throats at this point.
That's right.
And just say, well, yeah, but I'm putting money in your pocket. Shut up.
Damon.
First, thanks for having me on here. I'm happy that there's a large turnout of voting. I hope that this continues moving forward. I hope every party looks at their their policies and does a introspective win or lose to see what they can do to benefit the American people, and that the American people demand more for the parties, and that we stop voting party, but start voting what's going to make the best impact on our lives.
True. All right, Danny.
I'm proud of the work I did with Texas Advocate of Justice in 2018. We went to Florida and got the voting rights for over 1 million people that had felony convictions. They were able to vote in the election. The only disappointment I have in 2020 is that I couldn't convince my children to vote. I got a 19-year-old grandson and 30-something-year-old son and daughter, and I couldn't get them to see the need to register and to vote after going to Florida. And also in 2016, we went to Washington, D.C. and got the legislation changed to ban the box on applications at the federal level to ask, have you been convicted of a felony? No longer when you fill out the application, that's not on there. Removed it. But I couldn't get my kids. And I'm putting them on blast, throwing them up under the bus. I'm not going to say. But I couldn't convince my kids to register to vote. Gosh.
That's sad. Danny, Lane, take us out.
I'm an originist. I like to look at how things were started to see kind of what they are and what they're about. And I think, Stacey, you encapsulated that earlier about we started as a capitalistic, opportunistic, basically the United States was started as a corporation. If we look back at who founded our country, it was founded as a corporation, literally. And so I want to pay
taxes.
I get that. But is that where we want to be? Is that what we want to aspire to be? And Biden was not my first choice. He wasn't even my second choice. But he is more in the direction of where I would like to see us as a nation go towards than Donald Trump.
Well, right now you've got the slight advantage there, Lane. We're still at 223, 174, and
But here's the problem that we're going to face. That if it's not a blowout, and it's clearly not going to be, the scorched earth that the Republican Party is going to leave behind it is going to be so damaging to our democracy, causing the questioning of the legitimacy of just the same that they've been doing now. That's my biggest fear, is what's going to start happening on the streets come January.
Well, there you go. And that's about all the time that we have. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll keep our fingers crossed. And are you guys going to stay up, or are you going to go to bed?
I'm staying up. I can't. I'm going.
I'm going to bed.
Finale. This is the season finale.
It's
my
the
natural
first
bedtime
episode of
is
the last
1:30.
season.
So.
We already established
1:30.
Hey, when your natural bedtime is 1:30. Oh goodness. Yeah.
Nice.
That's the season finale. I ain't going home.
I'm still.